Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to accompany you today. I know you're watching this video to relax or help you sleep. So first, please like and subscribe. Where are you from? What time is it? Relax, unwind, and enjoy the moment. We shouldn't pray for miracles. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. The cry resounded throughout the dusty, sweaty crowd of people pushing in on me from all sides. I could feel the hot breath parting the back of my hair, see the whites of the eyes of the man rocking back and forth next to me. We all sat in newfound, stunned silence as the child took two, shaking steps, his wheelchair discarded behind him like an unwanted plaything. The tent pitched and billowed against the dry summer wind, creating a low rumbling, as if the heavenly host had begun a drum roll of anticipation. The boy walked into the outstretched arms of the Reverend, who scooped him up and held him aloft, a testament for the gathered crowd in this revival. I felt that familiar warm tingle in the pit of my stomach. I had been raised Catholic, and I used to even consider myself devout. But the world has a way of beating hope in the greater good out of a person. But prison is specifically engineered to do it with maximum efficiency. I rubbed my shaved head, wiping a glistening layer of sweat on my jeans, trying to stifle the hint of religious fervor that had reared its head again. But looking when the smiling boy pushed his wheelchair, the tool that had been his own little prison, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a God. Rationally, I knew he could be a plant, a paid actor, just playing a role. But the possibility of healing, reconciliation, and a fresh start is far sweeter than any narcotic the world can offer. I know that from experience. So, dragging my feet, I joined the line of petitioners waiting for their miracle. The usher directing the liquid flow of human bodies looked at me with undisguised disdain, but waved me through regardless. "If you believe that it is God's will," the Reverend cried, spittle flying onto the nearest audience members, "you shall receive a true blessing tonight." The next in line, a young couple came forward as the ushers led them by the hand. I could not hear what words they exchanged to the minister as he leaned towards them, but I could tears falling from the young woman's face. The lights began to surge, the music growing in intensity, as the preacher stood up and gazed around the room. This man before me has asked for prayer to increase his faith. Now what can be more fitting for a night like this? The audience hung on the preacher's every word as they stretched out their hands. Intense silence filled the multitude as the minister slowly touched the shaking man's forehead. Then, with an explosion of activity, the young penitent began to shake violently. His whole body was rocking back and forth like we were being tossed on a stormy sea, until his knees buckled and he fell to the dusty floor, limbs flailing. The crowd gasped audibly as the young woman he had arrived with was crying helplessly as his seizure worsened. Despite the distance and the mass of bodies obscuring my sight, I could see murky foam pouring from his mouth and hear the choked gurgle escape his throat. "There's no need to panic now," the preacher began again, his bravado returning. "Christ gave us the ministry of deliverance for a reason, didn't he?" The noise of the crowd quickly turned from concern to a deafening roar of approval at the words, and outstretched hands directed prayer towards the quivering, prostrate figure. My perception became fuzzy, the fervor of the massive horde overwhelming my senses as they began to recite some portion of the Psalms over the sick man and the now silent woman. I was paralyzed, deciding between my options. Selfishly, I wanted to turn around now and pretend nothing happened in the large sprung tent I had stopped in on a whim, walk back out into the park and go back to my mundane, everyday life. But I knew rationally that this was wrong. This man was clearly having a medical emergency, while hundreds of people prayed over him and did nothing more. My decision was made when I saw that the frothy spittle had started to fleck with blood. I began to cut my way through the crowd, weaving in between the throng of outstretched arms. I retrieved my cell phone and began to dial 911, but the operator's words were completely drowned out by the exuberant chanting, singing, and glossolalia filling the enclosed space. "We're in the Mountain View Park," I managed to yell into the receiver end of my phone. "Just send an ambulance, maybe the cops too. I think he's having a seizure." With help hopefully on the way, I began to push forward even more, but it felt as if I was wading into waist-deep water as the shoulders, legs, and torsos pressed in from all sides. Fortunately, everyone on the makeshift stage was too enraptured by the performance to notice my arrival. I walked up to the bald, beet-red pastor and grabbed him by the sleeves of his poorly fitted suit, shaking him roughly from his reverie. His eyes shot open and flashed briefly with a rage so venomous I took a half-step back. His face then lit with a smile that barely shifted his pudgy face, but I didn't realize why until I felt a pair of strong arms drag me backwards. "Don't interfere with the exorcism. Do you want this boy to be damned?" The voice belonged to whoever held me in a sort of bear hug, firm but not crushing. I turned my head to see it belonged to the deacon who had been leading congregants one after another to the stage for their miracles. "He's having a seizure. It's been going on for way too long, man," I pleaded, while the deacon slowly shook his head. "Just have faith," the man said, as his eyes focused on the scene before us. I turned my head and felt my breath catch in my throat. The man was no longer laying flat on the ground. Rather, he was a few feet above it. The eyes of the crowd tracked as he almost imperceptibly rose into the air. Then the tent resounded with a crack like a gunshot. I flinched but still saw the limbs of the floating figure begin to bend backwards at impossible angles, one by one, with their own deafening, painful snapping noise. In moments, the man who now hovered about 1 story in the air resembled a crushed spider with all its legs bent inwards as his body fell to the ground with a wet thud. I could hear parts of the crowd exclaim in fear and disgust. Some even ran to the exit, but the majority held fast, hands lifted high in supplication, eyes shut to the horror taking place feet away from them. The stage itself was quiet, the crumpled form on the floor mercifully still in death. His lover collapsed on her side weeping, and the pastor looking on impassively. The preacher bowed his head for a moment, deep in meditation, before suddenly raising his eyes and declaring in a booming voice that the demon had been banished back to where it belonged. "Do not fear for what has happened to this boy's mortal form, for even now I assure you he shares in our inheritance in God's kingdom." His words filled me with disgust, but I couldn't take my eyes away from the lifeless, deformed corpse on the stage. What I had seen was impossible, but those words brought me no comfort as I watched the limbs begin to twitch once more, while the crowd continued to pray in the religious ecstasy brought on by this dreadful miracle. The once dead form began to stand once more, arms and legs slowly returning to their original position as he straightened up. When the figure rose to his full height, he looked out towards the crowd, eyes glassy and dark. One by one, everyone present became aware of the new horrifying spectacle and reacted with shock and terror. The now sputtering minister started to lift his Bible and spout off some vain prayer when this thing quickly raised its hand over his forehead. In a mockery of how he had been anointed just minutes earlier in his life, the strung-up, lifeless puppet touched the face of the minister as he gaped like a fish out of water. At first, nothing seemed to change, but after a few moments, the already substantial girth of the suited charlatan's stomach began to bulge. He doubled over, a cry of pain and fear escaping his mouth, only for it to be followed by a puff of dark smoke. As the arms holding me began to loosen, I watched in pure fear as the smoke emitting from the man in front of me gave way to bright orange embers, and then his body erupted into red flames. In seconds, the wooden stage caught ablaze, and the whoosh of the fire was met by the cacophony of terrified cries as the crowd surged towards the exit. Finally wriggling free of my now slack-jawed captor, I began to follow the fleeing congregation, feeling my feet sinking into the soft flesh of those unfortunate enough to be caught by the stampede. The immense pressure of bodies tore through the thin walls of the tent as thick, dark smoke began to fill the enclosed space. I felt I was about to be choked by the weight of bodies crushing on me from all directions, combined with the copious amount of smoke I had already inhaled. But I finally burst out into the cold, clear night as the crowd finally rushed out of the exit. I could hear the sirens coming from far off, in response to my call or the thick column of smoke. I am still unsure. Screams echoed into the darkness as the now blazing tent caved inwards, dooming those who were either too slow or disoriented by the smoke. But the instant before the tent fell, I swear I saw a dark figure shoot out from the tent and ascend upwards in a blur of movement. In my mind, I can still faintly hear the hideous sound of what I can only imagine to be massive, leathery wings flapping through the cool, twilight air. I shivered, overwhelmed by the fear of both what I had seen and the horrible things I could only imagine, and for the first time in years, I prayed. I don't think the gas station I work at is normal. I want to start this off with the simple fact that I don't believe in ghosts. At least I didn't. I'm not sure anymore. Sorry, let me give you a quick background of my situation. Have you ever found yourself making your way into a gas station at the edge of town and turned your gaze towards the sleep-deprived clerk quietly minding his business? Well, shit, you may have met me. I work the overnight shift at my local gas station, sitting between abandoned, dilapidated buildings and a stretch of flourishing forests, the road between being the only connector to these two opposites of life. Now, I'm sure you're probably asking, that sounds pretty sketchy. Why would you work there? I know because I asked myself the same thing, but the pay isn't bad, and being a broke 20-year-old didn't suit me. The owners aren't bad people, just distant. In my 3 months of working here, I've only spoken to them a handful of times. The interview process felt weird too. All I got was a phone call asking if I wanted the job, and if I could work the hours. Of course, I answered yes. Who wouldn't? And only a few days later, I found myself at the front counter with a list of instructions and to-dos. The interior was nothing special, if I'm being honest. Shelves of overpriced candy and canned goods with a set of coolers lining the sidewall. Then there was me, sat up at my desk next to the front door, with a squeaky old chair and a cash register that always seems to want to get stuck every 4 transactions. With all that being said, you would assume that I hate my job, but I don't. It's extremely quiet. I only get a handful of customers a night, and they usually keep to themselves. I grew to think of the insulation as a small perk of the job. But something happened last night that I just need someone else to hear. 1:48 a.m. Leaning back in my chair, I sat making my way through the latest book in my backlog when I heard the familiar ding coming from the front door. Placing my book down, I stood up to face the man who had entered the store. The best way I could describe him was the stereotypical trucker. Boots, blue jeans, Carhartt jacket, and a big beard. Yet he was clean without a single speck of dirt on him. "Evening, sir. What can I do for you?" Giving him my best, "I'm tired, just tell me what you want and leave," greeting I could muster. "Oh, nothing much. Just give me 20 on the diesel for pump 4. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a $20 bill, handing it to me. As I entered in the information on my keypad, he spoke again. "I'd recommend you stay safe out here. I've heard stories of weird things happening around here. Wouldn't want anything bad to happen." Raising my eyebrow, I glanced over at him to see if he was threatening me, but no, he just stood there waiting for me to give him the okay. I appreciate the advice, but I've never seen anything out of the ordinary over here. I'd say your sources are feeding you lies. Handing him his receipt, he chuckled as he made his way out of the store, and within a couple minutes, he was gone. 2 a.m. Another ding resounded in my ears, placing my book back down. I stood up and identified the new customer. That's when things started taking a weird turn. The same man from a half hour ago stood in front of me. Same boots, same jeans, same jacket, same everything. However, this time his jeans were lined with small patches of dirt. As confused as I was, I decided to leave it alone and just do my job. "Evening, sir. What can I do for you?" Standing in front of my counter, I could feel his eyes digging burrows through me. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long for my answer. "Oh, nothing much. Just give me 20 on the diesel for pump 4. Handing me a $20 bill as he finished. Wanting him out as soon as possible, I quickly entered everything in on my register and handed him his receipt. "I'd recommend you stay safe out here. I've heard stories of weird things happening around here. Wouldn't want anything bad to happen." Having my fair share of this guy's ominous bullshit, I decided to not encourage this conversation. "Ya man, I hear you." With that, he made his way out, and I tried to return to my book, getting my mind off of this weird customer. 2:38 a.m. Once again, the ring of the front door pulled my attention, and almost as if on cue, he was back. But something was off this time. It looked as if he just crawled out of a grave with dirt and residue coating his whole body. And if that wasn't enough, he had thick cuts across his arms and face. However, no blood leaked out of the gashes. Deciding I'd had enough of this charade, I shouted at the man. In hindsight, that probably wasn't the best idea, but can you blame me? All right, man, what the hell happened to you? This is your third time here, and it looks like you took a quick detour into the local swamp. Pointing at him in fury, or fear, I wasn't quite sure, I looked him dead in the eyes. But that was easily my worst mistake. His eyes were milky as if someone drowned out the color in them. Retracting my hand, I couldn't help the gulp retreating down my throat. Hell, I wish I could too. As he opened his mouth, his jaw produced a wretched cracking before producing noise. Oh, nothing much. Just give me 20 on the diesel for pump 4. As if robotic, he reached out and handed me another bill. I could see more cuts and bruises on his fingers. Gingerly, I reached out and snatched the bill from his hand and began to enter it into my register. My heart sank, and I felt a frigid chill crawl up my spine as I noticed the small pop-up on the screen. Pump new balance, $40. I began to sweat as my brain turned in my head, panicking. I jerked my head towards the window, facing the lot. To my horror, no truck sat anywhere outside. As I started contemplating on whether I was going insane or just tired, I felt heat building on my wrist. Spinning my head back to the man, I saw him tightly gripping my wrist. However, I couldn't feel the pressure of his grip. The only thing I could feel was a burning sensation that kept growing as he held my wrist. Ah! Let go of my arm! What the hell do you think you... My voice lost all power as I met the horror in front of me. The man now held his face only a few inches from mine as we made eye contact. His face twisted into a horrifying smile, producing cracked teeth. I'd recommend you stay safe out here. I've heard stories of weird things happening around here. Wouldn't want you to join the rest. At this point, I was frozen in fear. My voice left me to fend for myself as all I could do was stare at this man standing in front of me. It felt as though we stood there for minutes before I finally built up the courage to say something. You don't say... Giving him my own wary smile, I was finally able to yank my wrist from his grasp, only to be met with charcoal ring with a small crimson symbol sitting in the middle where his hand previously held. Before I could even look back up, he had already turned on his feet, making his way out the store, moving out of my line of sight. Without a moment to think, I collapsed on the chair. My breathing felt haggard as I tried to steady myself from what the hell I just experienced. After a moment, I checked my phone for the time. It read 2:40. 2 minutes? I screamed in my head. How the hell could it have just been 2 minutes? Lowering my head, I just decided to surrender myself to this weirdness and tried to brush it back into my mind to finish my shift. But I wasn't so lucky. 3:08 a.m., I was in the back room looking for some stock to put out as the ding rang out from the front. Flinching, I couldn't help but think back to that man. Was he back? Sighing as I accepted my fate, I walked out to the front. What awaited me, however, wasn't what I expected. I'm still not sure what it was either. It looked like a tall man around 6'5". He was dressed in a long black trench coat with a hood thrown over his head. I tried to look into his face, but all I was met with was a deep, dark abyss. It felt as if I was looking at nothing at all. Whatever it was, it quickly made its way to the register and placed a thin white slip of paper on the counter before leaving as quickly as it had arrived. However weary I was of the contents of this note, I couldn't help the curiosity sprouting in my brain, so I opened it. The note contained only 2 words written in a soft, thin cursive. You passed? Passed? Passed what? Staring down at the paper, I didn't understand what it meant. Did I pass some type of challenge? Maybe a game? I honestly didn't know. That's when the familiar ring of the door gave me a slight heart attack. Landon, how's it going, bro? It was Tyler, my best friend who I just about wanted to strangle to death for the scare he just gave me. After calming down, I explained what just happened, and I could tell he didn't believe me. Okay, man, how about I stay with you for the rest of your shift so you don't see any more spooky ghosts? Laughing as he finished, I took him up on the offer, and the night flew by without anything else happening. When the opener finally came in, I quickly gathered my stuff before making my way towards the door. However, he stopped me before I made it out. "Oh, you be careful on your way home. Apparently some dude crashed into a ditch last night. You never know what kind of people are on the road." I went pale, slowly turning back towards him, and cleared my throat. You wouldn't know what kind of car the guy was driving, would you?" Seconds passed like minutes as I could see him thinking. "Yeah, I think they were saying a big pickup truck or something like that." I could feel sweat fall down my face after hearing that, nodding. I made my way to my car and rushed home. I've been home ever since, still trying to wrap my head around everything that occurred last night. Even while writing this, the burn mark is still sat on my wrist, reminding me of what happened. As I have been dwelling on everything, the mark reminds me more and more, like some type of branding. Nonetheless, I have work again tonight, and after all that, I'm not game to just sit idly by and just wait for whatever's going on at the gas station to come and get me. I'm gonna go in a little early tonight and ask the guy who's closing if he's ever seen anything out of the ordinary. I'm hoping he may have some insight for me. If you have any idea of what might be happening, please let me know. I'll hopefully come back and be able to give closure to this whole ordeal. However, if I don't, assume the worst. And that's it for today. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, subscribe, and leave a comment letting me know what you think. Relax, unwind, and get some sleep. See you in the next video.